What if the darkest secrets of our world aren't hidden in forgotten crypts or desert ruins, but in the crushing, lightless expanse beneath the waves? For millennia, humanity has gazed upon the vast, indifferent face of the ocean, believing its deepest mysteries were merely geological, its abyssal plains silent and empty. But what if ancient terrors, not of our making, lie waiting in its abyssal heart? What if certain families, by accident or design, stumble upon truths too vast, too terrible to comprehend? And what if the price of such knowledge isn't just madness, but a generational curse, an inescapable debt claimed by forces older than humanity itself? Across the windswept shores of the Pacific Northwest, where the land meets a perpetually churning sea, there exists a silence, not the silence of peace, but of a long-held secret, a burden passed down through bloodlines like a genetic flaw. This is a story rooted in American maritime history, whispered in the salt-laced air of a decaying fishing village. A tale rarely told, almost forgotten, yet documented in fragments by those brave or foolish enough to seek it. It begins not in the misty present, but decades ago, with a fateful expedition into one of Earth's most formidable frontiers. The Tonga Trench, a name that echoes with the profound emptiness of ultimate depth, a geological scar on the planet's face that plunges miles into perpetual night. It was there, in the unfathomable darkness, that an ancestor's ambition pierced the veil, awakening something that should have remained undisturbed, something ancient, something that defied natural law. Abyssal protectors, born of a civilization lost to time, now stirred from an eons-long slumber, and their awakening came with a horrifying price. A price paid not in gold or sacrifice, but in blood, in sanity, in lives inexplicably consumed by the sea itself. The Atherton family, they call it a curse. Science calls it baffling. Logic finds no explanation. But what if it is neither? What if it is merely a collection, a primordial debt finally being exacted? Imagine a place where salt-bleached houses cling precariously to cliffs, their windows reflecting a perpetually gray, churning sea. The air, heavy with brine and the scent of slow decay, is broken only by the mournful wail of distant foghorns. Here, the ocean isn't just a backdrop, it is a character, vast and indifferent, holding secrets in its depths, while the very land seems haunted by a past that refuses to die. This is their prison, their fragile present. Each Atherton, a specter bound by an ancestor's deep-sea hubris. Their burden isn't cosmic, but tangible, a legacy of unexplained disappearances, maritime accidents, and a creeping madness that defies medical diagnosis. They existed under an unspoken pact of silence, a desperate, futile attempt to contain a terrible inheritance. But now, that fragile peace has shattered. The sudden, inexplicable vanishing of the family's youngest, vanished from their very home, has cracked the ancient silence. And from the abyssal depths near the Tonga Trench, strange, unidentifiable sonar readings begin to emanate, while fragments of alien artifacts wash ashore. The sea is calling for its due, and the Athertons are now forced to seek help, to document their inherited nightmare, to unearth the truth of a monstrous folly that began in the deepest trench and has now surfaced to claim its final victims. Stay with us, because what we are about to reveal may change your perception of the oceans forever. In the desolate twilight of their inherited despair, the Atherton family reached out, their desperate plea echoing beyond the salt-chapped walls of their isolated village, searching for a beacon of logic in a sea of encroaching madness. Their call found Dr. Eris Thorne, a name whispered with reverence in the hallowed halls of marine archaeology, a man whose life's work revolved around the meticulous dissection of oceanic enigmas. Not a believer in curses or spectral debts, Thorne was, first and foremost, a scientist. His mind, honed by decades spent sifting through the silt of forgotten history, operated on the immutable laws of evidence and empirical truth. Dr. Thorne embodied the rigorous skepticism inherent in American academic authority. Educated at venerable institutions, his career was built on unraveling the tangles of maritime disaster, identifying the precise forces that brought down ships, not the whispers of ancient malevolence. He had charted the final moments of whaling vessels lost to storms off the New England coast, meticulously documented the forgotten wrecks of Civil War-era blockade runners, and analyzed the deep-sea geology surrounding inexplicable anomalies. His approach was cold, systematic, and utterly devoid of romantic speculation. He trusted sonar data, chemical analysis, and structural integrity reports. A family curse, especially one claiming primordial origins from the Tonga Trench, would typically be dismissed as the byproduct of collective hysteria, a folk tale spun from grief and isolation. Yet the data presented by the Athertons was uncomfortably compelling, defying his carefully constructed scientific worldview. The unidentifiable sonar readings, pulsing from the abyssal darkness near the Tonga Trench, were not consistent with known geological formations or typical human-made debris. They spoke of structured anomalies, of patterns that hinted at an intelligence far beyond anything recorded. And then there were the artifacts, fragments washing ashore, not of wood or metal or modern plastic, but of materials defying classification, bearing intricate carvings alien to any known terrestrial culture. These were not the faded relics of forgotten American maritime history. They were something profoundly, unnervingly different. This confluence of the inexplicable, documented with a desperate precision by the terrified Athertons, began to prick at Thorne's unwavering scientific resolve. It wasn't the curse that drew him in, but the sheer scientific impossibility of the evidence. His skepticism, rather than dismissing the narrative outright, compelled him to investigate, to dissect the anomaly with every tool at his disposal. He saw not a supernatural threat, but an unprecedented scientific puzzle, a challenge to the very boundaries of human understanding. The search for truth, for Thorne, was a dispassionate journey into the empirical, no matter how unsettling the destination might prove. Join us as we dive deeper into the depths of Dr. Thorne's investigation, where the bedrock of scientific certainty begins to crack under the immense pressure of the unknown. The whispers of the sea carry stories not meant for human ears, tales of depths so profound they touch the very edge of the unknown. Our journey into the heart of the Atherton curse demands a return to its genesis, the ill-fated expedition of Elias Atherton, a man driven by an insatiable thirst for discovery. Elias, the family patriarch, was not merely an adventurer, but a visionary mariner who, in the early 20th century, dared to challenge the Pacific's most formidable frontier, the Tonga Trench. He was an American pioneer of the abyssal plain, his vessel, the Leviathan, a testament to human audacity against nature's might and the era's boundless ambition. Historical logs, painstakingly preserved by the Atherton descendants, reveal a precise date, October 17th, 1928. Far from the familiar currents, deep within the crushing pressures of the trench's northern reaches, Elias's crew deployed experimental sonar arrays. What they encountered defied every known principle of geology and marine biology. The readings, initially dismissed as equipment malfunction, began to coalesce into impossibly geometric forms, towering structures of unearthly design. These were not natural formations. They were monuments. They were the unmistakable signature of intelligence, of purpose, crafted by hands or tentacles unimaginable. Imagine the chilling awe as the Leviathan's rudimentary cameras, battling the abyssal gloom, captured the first fleeting glimpses, not of mere rock, but of intricately carved megaliths, colossal archways, and spires that seemed to mock the very concept of terrestrial architecture. A city, a civilization, submerged for epochs untold. What primordial intelligence could have wrought such wonders in the crushing dark, undisturbed for millennia? This was the moment of discovery, yes, but also the undeniable moment of profound intrusion. The instant humanity's crude probes brushed against a slumbering antiquity. The very act of observation, of shining light into that ancient darkness, may have been the catalyst. But discovery, particularly of the forbidden kind, often comes at an unimaginable price. The logs. Elias's own meticulous entries grow increasingly frantic, detailing inexplicable equipment failures, bizarre auditory phenomena described as subharmonic thrumming resonating through the hull, and a pervasive sense of dread that settled over the entire crew like an abyssal shadow. Elias, a man of unwavering scientific conviction, found himself confronted by phenomena that shredded his rational framework, challenging the very bedrock of his understanding. It was not the ruins themselves that directly awakened the horror, but perhaps the sheer audacity of human presence, an unwanted echo disturbing a profound, silent vigil that had lasted since before recorded history. Did their lights, their sound waves, their very breath break a primordial seal? The first of the incidents occurred shortly after the initial discovery. A crewman, seemingly consumed by an invisible panic, vanished overboard in broad daylight, his screams swallowed by the vast, indifferent maw of the Pacific. No body was ever recovered, just a chilling void where a man once stood, and a spreading pall of terror. This was not a simple maritime accident. This was a direct, chilling response, a message from the deepest dark. The true price of forbidden knowledge, it seemed, was already being collected. But what then was this ancient intelligence they had stumbled upon? And what was its true nature, beyond the silent guardians of stone? The silence that descended upon the Atherton household after the vanishing of their youngest was not peace, but the heavy cloak of a deepening dread. It was the quiet before the storm, the suffocating stillness of an abyss about to erupt. For generations, their torment had largely been an internal affair, a specter haunting their lineage, claiming kin through shadowed maritime accidents or the creeping tendrils of madness. But this time, the ocean, their relentless tormentor and silent keeper of secrets, began to speak in a language not of wails and crashes, but of inexplicable frequencies and tangible alien whispers. From the crushing depths of the Pacific, specifically from the abyssal plains surrounding the Tonga Trench, sonar readings began to register anomalies that defied all known oceanographic classifications. Marine research vessels, initially dismissing them as equipment malfunctions or seismic tremors, soon found themselves grappling with data that painted a picture of impossible geometries, pulsating, rhythmic patterns, too regular for natural phenomena, too vast for any known human construct, were echoing from a region previously believed to be barren. save for the deepest dwelling creatures. Were these echoes from a geological marvel or from something forged by an intelligence beyond our comprehension, patiently waiting in the darkness? The sheer scale of these subsurface echoes hinted at a presence so immense it dwarfed humanity's greatest ambitions. Then, the ocean began to give up its dead, not in the form of drowned sailors, but fragments of something far older, far more unsettling. Along the remote, salt-battered coastlines of the Pacific Northwest, near the Atherton's decaying village, the tides began to deposit artifacts unlike anything catalogued by human history or geology. Jagged shards of what appeared to be obsidian, yet possessed an unnatural luminescence that flickered with a faint internal cold. Smooth, heavy stones, impossibly dense, etched with symbols that resembled no known alphabet, their lines forming intricate, non-Euclidean patterns that seemed to shift as one gazed upon them, radiating a faint, almost imperceptible hum that resonated in the very bones. Divers and local fishermen, initially curious, soon grew wary. These were not relics of a forgotten shipwreck. They were fragments of a forgotten world, pieces of an intelligence that predated human memory, now returned to the surface. Each discovery was a chilling affirmation of the Atherton's whispered fears, a physical manifestation of the primordial debt. Was the abyss not merely collecting its due, but actively returning pieces of its unfathomable self to the surface as a grim offering? This unholy synchronicity. The disappearance of the Atherton child, the bizarre sonar signatures, the alien relics washing ashore, shattered the family's generations-long pact of silence. The horror had transcended their bloodline. It was now a global anomaly, a challenge to the very fabric of scientific understanding and human sanity. The deep, dark pulse of the Tonga Trench seemed to align with the erratic beat of their cursed hearts. The ocean, once a silent witness, was now an active participant, bringing its ancient judgment to the shores of the living. What was the true connection between these inexplicable phenomena and the Atherton lineage? And what untold depths of terror lay hidden yet to surface from the lightless chasms that spawned them, now demanding a horrifying price from the surface world? As the chilling reality of the Atherton family's plight began to pierce the veil of generations of silence, the focus inevitably turned to the patriarch, whose hubris had cast such a long, dark shadow. Commander Elijah Atherton. His ill-fated expedition, a whisper in the annals of forgotten American maritime history, held the key. It was in the dusty, salt-laced archives, among brittle charts and faded logbooks, that the first true historical discovery was made. Not a grand heralded finding, but a series of cryptic entries in the commander's personal journal, long dismissed as the ramblings of a man broken by the unforgiving deep. The journal itself was a relic, its leather binding cracked, its pages stained with what appeared to be seawater and something darker, something akin to dried blood. Its entries, once precise navigational notes and scientific observations, gradually devolved into a frantic, almost poetic descent into madness. The earliest pages spoke of the boundless ambition that drove the commander's vessel, the Serafina, towards the Tonga Trench. They detailed the pioneering sonar scans, mapping the landscape no human eye had ever seen, a world of crushing pressure and eternal night. Yet even then, anomalous readings began to surface, echoes that defied geological explanation, patterns too regular, too symmetrical for the chaotic churn of the abyssal plane. Then came the visual confirmation, brief, terrifying glimpses through the Seraphina's reinforced portholes. Not geological formations, but colossal, impossible structures rising from the trench floor. Their geometry alien, their scale unfathomable. The journal entries grew shorter, more frantic. Commander Atherton wrote of an inexplicable hum that permeated the hull, a low, resonant thrum that seemed to vibrate not just the metal, but the very sanity of his crew. He described shadows that moved with unnatural speed in the perpetual darkness, fleeting forms too large, too ancient to be any known marine life. The scientific detachment evaporated, replaced by a growing dread, a terrifying awareness of being observed. The final entries from the Tonga Trench speak of a profound, primal encounter. A pressure within the submersible that wasn't mechanical, but sentient. A whisper that seemed to echo not in the ears, but in the deepest recesses of the mind. Atherton described a sensation of being weighed, judged, and ultimately bound. He spoke of an ancient intelligence awakened, disturbed from its aeons-long slumber, and of a price demanded, a horrific exchange for their trespass. The last legible words spoke of a primordial debt, a sacred chain forged in the abyss, binding his lineage to the very entity they had disturbed. This historical discovery, meticulously pieced together from fragmented records, unveiled not just an expedition's tragic end, but the very genesis of the Atherton curse. It was a tangible link, a chilling testament to the original sin that had unleashed an unfathomable force upon generations. The journal, once a curious artifact, now stands as a harrowing prophecy, its every faded line screaming of the inevitable reckoning. Are you ready to uncover the full terror woven into this ancient inheritance? The gray embrace of the Pacific Northwest, long a silent accomplice to the Atherton's grim inheritance, began to tighten its grip. Whispers, once confined to the shadowed corners of salt-eaten taverns, now echoed through the village streets, carried on the briny winds. The ocean, that vast, indifferent character, seemed to stir with a newfound malevolence. Local fishermen reported anomalies that defied every seasoned explanation. Compasses spinning wildly miles offshore, nets returning shredded with no discernible cause, and a chilling, almost rhythmic thrumming emanating from the abyssal depths. A sound that seemed to vibrate not just through the hull, but through the very bones of the listener. These were not isolated incidents. They were a symphony of disquiet, each note a prelude to a crescendo of terror. The strange sonar readings, initially dismissed as equipment malfunctions or seismic quirks, grew bolder, more insistent. They pulsed from the direction of the Tonga Trench, a signature unlike anything known to marine science. Too structured for geology, too erratic for known biological activity, yet too powerful to be ignored. It was as if something immense, mechanical yet organic, was stirring in the profound darkness, awakening from an aeons-long slumber. And then the artifacts began to arrive, not just the occasional barnacle-encrusted fragment that might be dismissed as historical flotsam, but a steady, unnerving trickle. Peculiar shards of obsidian-like material, impossibly smooth and unnaturally cold to the touch, bearing strange, non-Euclidean geometries. Some bore faint, luminescent glyphs that seemed to shift and writhe in the dim light, defying any known script or human design. They washed ashore after particularly violent storms, as if the ocean itself was regurgitating its ancient, indigestible secrets onto the shores of the Atherton village. Each piece was a chilling breadcrumb, leading back to an unspeakable origin. The tension in the Atherton household became a suffocating shroud. Generations of forced silence, of living under the shadow of an unspoken pact, had worn thin. Their burden, once a distant, abstract dread, was now a palpable presence, a chill that seeped into their very marrow. They had learned to live with the disappearances of distant cousins, the madness that sometimes claimed an uncle, attributing it to the sea's capricious nature or the harsh isolation of their lives. But now, the monstrous folly of their ancestor was no longer confined to the annals of their cursed lineage. It was demanding a current price. And then, the unthinkable happened. From their very home, nestled precariously close to the churning, unforgiving coastline, the youngest of the Atherton line simply vanished. No struggle, no trace, just an empty bed and an open window looking out onto the tempestuous sea. The air, heavy with the scent of brine and slow decay, now carried the unbearable lightness of a life extinguished without explanation. The last thread of their desperate, fragile peace snapped. The silence, so long their only defense, became their ultimate undoing. Who or what could claim a child from the very heart of their sanctuary? Was this the primordial debt finally being collected in full? A horrifying escalation of a curse that defied the boundaries of the terrestrial world. This was no longer a family's inherited nightmare to bear alone. This was an active, relentless, and malevolent force, its tendrils reaching from the deepest ocean to claim its due. The Athertons, stripped bare of their long-held defenses, now understood. To survive, they had to break the pact. They had to seek help. They had to confront the terrifying nature of the Abyssal Guardians. Are you ready to join us on this journey into the unknown depths? Into the very heart of a terror that refuses to stay buried? The arrival of the marine archaeologists and deep-sea investigators brought a flicker of strange hope to the salt-scarred village. Yet it did little to dispel the oppressive pall that hung over the Atherton family. Their initial skepticism, a shield of scientific detachment, began to fray the moment they stepped onto the waterlogged docks. The air itself seemed heavy, saturated not just with brine and the scent of slow decay, but with an unspoken history that clung to every weather-beaten shingle and every mournful wail of the distant foghorns. This was not merely a place. It was a testament to an enduring sorrow, a landscape etched by generations of unspoken dread. The Atherton silence, once a desperate pact, now began to unravel, piece by agonizing piece. Through hushed, hesitant interviews, the investigators were drawn into a narrative that defied logic. Stretching back decades to the ancestors' ill-fated venture into the abyssal maw of the Tonga Trench. They spoke of the vanishing youngest, a phantom in their own home, and the chilling synchronicity of the unidentifiable sonar readings now pulsing from the deep ocean floor. These sonar anomalies were unlike anything recorded in known oceanography. Not geological shifts, not natural formations, but structures of impossible regularity, too vast and too complex to be anything but artificial. Yet, who could build such monuments in the crushing darkness and unimaginable pressure of the deepest trench on Earth? Simultaneously, the fragments of ancient alien artifacts began their slow, relentless drift ashore. They were not merely old. Their composition defied terrestrial understanding. their geometric patterns whispering of an artistry utterly alien to human hands. These were not relics of a forgotten tribe. They were fragments of a technology, a civilization. That should not exist. The professional detachment of the lead marine archaeologist, Dr. Evelyn Reed, began to crack. Her initial analysis of the artifacts revealed isotopes unknown to science, suggesting an origin not just beyond our current understanding, but perhaps beyond our very world. And then there were the familial patterns, the unexplained disappearances, the maritime accidents, the creeping madness that had shadowed the Atherton bloodline for generations. Could the very blood of this family hold the key to an ancient predatory chain, a legacy of primordial terror passed down through their very DNA? The evidence, once dismissed as superstition, now coalesced into a chilling mosaic. The family's inherited nightmare was not a delusion. It was a tangible, active force reaching from the abyss. The weight of forgotten American maritime history began to press down, not as a collection of dusty facts, but as a living, malevolent presence. Each discovery deepened the enigma. Each fragment of truth only multiplied the questions. What primordial force had been awakened in the trench? What price was the abyss now collecting? And what did it truly seek? Stay with us, because what we are about to reveal may change your perception of the oceans forever. The search for truth never ends, and ours is just beginning. What terrors still lie buried in the crushing dark, patiently waiting to breach the fragile surface world? The hushed urgency of the Atherton family's plea finally broke generations of silence, reaching Dr. Eris Thorne, a leading abyssal archaeologist from the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute. His initial professional skepticism quickly dissolved, replaced by a profound unease at the tangible evidence presented. Fragments of an unknown composite material, unlike any on Earth. These weren't anomalies, they were impossibilities. The spectral artifacts, shimmering as if absorbing light, defied conventional geological and chemical analysis. Their atomic structure was too dense, too organized to be terrestrial, as if forged under unimaginable pressures, bearing an alien script. They had washed ashore near the Atherton village, carried by currents from the Tonga Trench. But it was the chilling precision of the U.S. Navy sonar readings that truly escalated the mystery. Initially dismissed as equipment malfunction, the data revealed immense, geometrically perfect structures on the Tonga Trench floor, at depths considered inert. Their scale dwarfed any known human construction, suggesting an engineering feat beyond any recorded civilization. How could such monumental works exist, undiscovered, beneath miles of crushing water, hidden from all but the most sensitive instruments? The disappearance of young Silas Atherton, once a local missing persons case, now took on a chilling, almost ritualistic resonance. Comparing it against generations of family losses, each vanishing, each maritime disaster, attributed to bad luck or madness, revealed a malevolent, recurring pattern. The ocean, once their provider, had become a relentless creditor, demanding an unfathomable interest. Thorne's team prepared for deep-sea reconnaissance. A new and unsettling pattern emerged from the sonar data. The static signatures of these structures occasionally pulsed with a faint, rhythmic energy, a silent beat from the abyss. What ancient mechanism lay dormant, or perhaps merely waiting in the unfathomable darkness of the Tonga Trench? What dormant power, stirred by an ancestor's reckless curiosity, was now demanding its horrific recompense? The whispers clinging to the Atherton name, Those tales of vanishing kin and creeping madness all trace back to one audacious ambition: Elias Atherton. In the early 20th century, when the ocean's deepest chasms remained mythic voids, Elias, a visionary of unsettling drive, poured his fortune into a vessel for the abyss. His target, the crushing, lightless expanse of the Tonga Trench, a wound in Earth's crust over 6 miles deep. This was no mere scientific endeavor. It was a personal crusade into the unknown, an obsessive pursuit of discovery, a descent into oblivion itself. The submersible, an iron sphere with tiny portholes, began its agonizingly slow plunge. Days bled into nights, marked by groaning steel and the ceaseless, inky blackness pressing against their hull. Each meter was a step further from the known, a journey into a realm where existence seemed alien. What compels a man to seek such a terrifying void? Was it thirst for knowledge, or an insatiable hunger for glory, blinding him to ancient warnings whispered by the sea? Then, anomalies registered, impossible geometry on nascent sonar, faint yet undeniable. As they neared the trench floor, through arc lights, colossal, regular structures coalesced from the gloom. Not natural formations, they rose like cyclopean monuments from the black silt, too sharp, too precise. A silent, unfathomably vast city of the deep, untouched by time, bearing witness to a lost intellect beyond human comprehension. It was amidst these titanic structures that the true horror unfolded. Readings intensified, not just structural, but something alive. A resonant force, an energy signature from the sunken city's heart. Elias, driven by unholy curiosity, positioned the submersible over a central edifice. As his crude manipulator arm extended, attempting to retrieve a fragment, a sudden blinding pulse of light erupted from the abyss. It was then, in that terrifying instant, the ancient protectors awakened. They were not physical beings, but an overwhelming, palpable presence. A surge of primordial consciousness. It flooded the submersible, penetrating the crew's minds. Elias and his men were overwhelmed not by force, but by a chilling whisper of immense age and cold fury. They saw visions of deep time, of a vigilant horror coiled within the earth, disturbed. The artifact, grasped, shimmered with unnatural energy, a dark jewel pulsing with malevolent life, embedding itself, not just in their hands, but in their very lineage. The expedition barely escaped, resurfacing with a fragment of the unknown and minds irrevocably shattered. Whispers began immediately. Elias, once resolute, returned haunted, his eyes reflecting the abyss. One crew member vanished. Another descended into irreversible madness. The curse had taken root, a slow, insidious poison, passed down through generations. What primordial debt did Elias Atherton incur in that lightless realm? And what terrifying force did he truly unleash upon his descendants? A force now re-emerging. The oceanic adventure is just beginning. The ocean, a vast canvas of forgotten narratives, began to paint a new, chilling picture. As the search for young Elias Atherton intensified along the rugged coast, a far more unsettling development unfolded in the abyssal plains of the Pacific. Dr. Eris Thorne, a leading figure in marine acoustics, initially dismissed peculiar sonar readings as equipment malfunction. Yet his decades charting the ocean's depths for the Naval Research Laboratory told him otherwise. What his instruments now relayed defied all established understanding of the deep. These were not random echoes. Initial reports, filtering through remote hydrophones near the Tonga Trench, spoke of highly organized, cyclical pulses. They weren't the chaotic cacophony of geological shifts, nor the rhythmic songs of known marine life. Instead, they bore a chilling resemblance to complex patterns, almost communication. Spectral signatures, recorded where light dared not venture, showed baffling regularity, hinting at unnatural origin. It was as if something was consciously manipulating sound in the deepest parts of the world. As Thorne and his team delved deeper, overlaying new data with archived geophysical surveys, the anomalies intensified. These pulses weren't isolated. They emanated from a specific, previously unmapped region within the Tonga Trench, an area distinguished by an unsettling absence of geological dynamism. The silence of that particular abyss, once merely curious, now felt profoundly ominous. What could generate such intricate sonic architecture in a place devoid of large-scale geological activity? The question gnawed at Thorne, stirring a primordial unease. His initial scientific detachment began to fray under the relentless onslaught of incomprehensible data. Each new graph, each spectral analysis peeled back a layer of what humanity knew about the planet's last true frontier. The readings suggested not just presence, but purpose. The patterns would subtly alter frequency and amplitude, responding to deep-sea seismic events miles away, as if monitoring or influencing the unseen currents of the abyssal plain. This was an intelligence operating on a scale and at depths utterly beyond human comprehension. The whispers from the Tonga Trench grew louder, indecipherable yet profoundly unsettling. A symphony of the primordial, a chorus from a forgotten epic, stirring from a slumber deeper than the ocean. What was truly being communicated across those unfathomable distances, and to whom? The unsettling truth, coalescing from raw data, presented a terrifying prospect. These weren't merely echoes of a lost civilization, but the active pulse of an ancient entity that had endured the eons, patiently waiting. The instruments, once tools of discovery, had become conduits for archaic dread. The depths were not empty, they were merely silent. And now, that silence was being broken. What if the Atherton family's inherited nightmare was not just a curse, but a direct consequence of these very transmissions, an ancient signal now amplified, demanding a response? The true nature of these abyssal echoes remained elusive, yet their implications began to ripple outward, threatening to shatter the fragile peace of the surface world. The Pacific Northwest coast, cloaked in perpetual gray, bore an unbearable weight. The youngest Atherton gone without a trace. Their salt-bleached houses echoed with the family's raw grief, a void filled only by mournful foghorns. This wasn't just tragedy. It was chilling confirmation. The ancestral shadow, once whispered horror, now reached for their fragile present. The primordial debt was being collected, but the abyss offered no quiet demands. Simultaneously, bizarre, unidentifiable sonar readings pulsed from the crushing depths near the Tonga Trench. Not geological echoes or marine life. These were complex, rhythmic patterns, hinting at an intelligence, a design. Then, tangible proof. Fragments of unearthly, impossibly dense material washed ashore. Alien in composition, they defied classification. For generations, the Athertons clung to isolation, a desperate, unspoken pact against a terror pulsing in their blood. With a child gone, and undeniable evidence on their doorstep, that fragile barrier shattered. The time for whispers was over. They needed answers, answers beyond their isolated world. An agonizing call was made, admitting a nightmare passed down through their lineage. This compelled the arrival of Dr. Elias Vance, a marine archaeologist from the Smithsonian, renowned for his work on ancient anomalies. His initial examination of the artifacts deepened the enigma. Not metallic, organic, or geological, their atomic structure baffled every test. Yet a faint, almost imperceptible etching on one fragment, barely visible, resonated with disturbing familiarity. A glyph, stark and angular, it mirrored something glimpsed in faded, feverish sketches among the progenitor Atherton's fragmented expedition logs. From his ill-fated Tonga Trench voyage. Was this coincidence? Or was the abyss, stirred by ancient transgression, communicating through enigmatic echoes and alien stones? The connection was chillingly direct, undeniable. Sonar pulses from the trench, unidentifiable debris, the vanished child. All threads led back to one point: ancestral hubris. The search for truth had just begun, a descent into forgotten American maritime history, where the past was not a memory, but a living, malevolent current, dragging them into the deep. The sonar readings from the Tonga Trench, once isolated anomalies, began to pulse with a disquieting regularity, painting an abyssal landscape far more complex and unnerving than any deep-sea cartographer could have imagined. These weren't mere geological shifts. The patterns suggested an underlying order, a deliberate, colossal architecture veiled by the crushing weight of the ocean. Our marine geologists, their faces etched with a dawning dread, describe them as echoes from an impossible geometry. Structures too vast, too precise to be natural formations, yet too ancient to fit any known human timeline. They spoke of a silent, pulsating energy signature, a resonance unlike anything previously catalogued, emanating from the very heart of the deepest darkness. Meanwhile, on the weathered shores of the Pacific Northwest, the Atherton family's burden was deepening, manifesting in ways that transcended mere physical disappearances. A palpable change settled over the isolated fishing village, a pervasive chill that crept into homes even on the warmest days, a scent of brine mixed with something else, something metallic and sharp, carried on the sea breeze. Very air seemed heavier, charged with an unspoken dread. The fishermen, long stoic in their silence, started reporting strange disturbances in their nets, not just the usual debris, but fragments of unknown, dense materials, often covered in bioluminescent residue that pulsed faintly before fading, leaving behind an unsettling, slick film. They spoke of the ocean itself, growing restless, its murmurs taking on a more menacing tone, its currents pulling with an unnatural strength. As if an unseen hand stirred the very abyssal foundations. For the Athertons, the manifestations became deeply personal, intruding upon their waking moments and haunting their dreams. The creeping madness, long a whisper in their family lore, began to assert itself. They experienced shared auditory hallucinations, a low, resonant thrumming that seemed to vibrate through their very bones, or the distant, mournful wail that was not a foghorn, but something far more ancient, far more sorrowful, echoing from depths unknown. Objects in their homes would shift subtly, inexplicably, leaving behind trails of phosphorescence. The youngest remaining members of the family, particularly, exhibited a profound, almost magnetic draw to the churning sea. Their eyes, sometimes taking on a distant, knowing gleam, as if privy to secrets no human mind should bear. Was the abyss not merely claiming them, but attempting to communicate, or perhaps to imprint its own alien consciousness upon them? The grim inheritance was no longer a ghost. It was a tangible, insidious presence, seeping into the very fabric of their reality. How much more could they endure before the line between this world and the primordial deep dissolved entirely? The strange fragments, initially dismissed as geological anomalies or modern detritus, began to tell a different, more chilling story under the meticulous gaze of Dr. Eris Thorne's team. His initial skepticism, a hallmark of his academic rigor, dissolved with each successive analysis. These were not naturally occurring formations. Their crystalline structures, impossibly intricate, defied known metallurgy and geological processes. They pulsed with a faint, almost imperceptible energy signature, an echo of a power long dormant, yet somehow reawakened. The first breakthrough came from spectroscopic analysis. Within the impossibly dense matrix of one shard, a microscopic inscription was detected. Not a script known to man, not a language of any documented ancient culture, but a series of geometric patterns that seemed to shift and reconfigure under specialized light. It was a silent, alien language, whispering of an intelligence far beyond our grasp, confirming the terrifying premise the Atherton family had brought forth. This was indeed a relic from a civilization submerged not by flood, but by the very fabric of time. Meanwhile, the sonar anomalies from the Tonga Trench escalated. What began as sporadic, almost random pings transformed into a rhythmic, insistent pulse, a sound that seemed to resonate not just through the water, but within the very bones of those who heard it. Marine seismologists, initially perplexed, now openly admitted their data defied explanation. These were not natural tectonic shifts. These were not deep-sea currents. This was a pattern, an intentional emanation, growing stronger, closer. It was as if something immense was stirring, sending out a signal across the vast, silent chasms of the abyss. The correlation between the artifacts and the sonar pulses became undeniable. The energy signature from the fragments, faint as it was, mirrored the frequency of the trench emanations. It was a communication, perhaps, or a warning. But from whom, and to what end? The very notion pushed the boundaries of conventional science, forcing Thorne and his colleagues to confront the unthinkable, an active, intelligent presence lurking within the deepest parts of our own planet. The Atherton family's curse suddenly seemed less like folklore and more like a terrifying inherited historical record. The true chilling revelation emerged when historical maritime charts were cross-referenced with the evolving sonar patterns. There were faint, almost erased annotations on some of the oldest charts, particularly those dating back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries, marking areas suspiciously close to the source of the new emanations. Whispers of lost vessels, inexplicable disappearances in the area, and even vague, unconfirmed reports of luminescent structures seen by terrified sailors in the abyssal dark now took on a sinister new context. Was this a historical echo of the same awakening? Are you ready to uncover the secrets of the deep, to trace these ancient, malevolent threads back through time? Stay with us, because what we are about to reveal may change your perception of the oceans forever. The scientific community, once dismissive, was now gripped by a growing dread. The Tonga Trench, once a point of abstract geological interest, was becoming a gateway, and something was unequivocally pushing against the seal. The question was no longer if something was there, but what it was and what it wanted. The implications stretched beyond the Atherton family's plight. If these ancient protectors, these abyssal guardians, were indeed reawakening, what did that signify for the surface world? Their existence alone challenged everything known about human history, about life's origins on Earth. The fragments and the pulses were not just data points. They were the first terrifying whispers of an ancient intelligence, roused from millennia of slumber. The investigation had moved past mere curiosity. It was now a desperate race against an unknown primordial force. The ocean, vast and indifferent, was beginning to show its teeth. The sonar readings from the Tonga Trench continued to baffle our most experienced acousticians. What began as an isolated anomaly had escalated into a symphony of impossible frequencies, a pulse emanating from depths where no known life form, let alone a structure, could exist. The patterns were not random. They suggested an intelligence, a rhythmic communication, echoing from geological strata that predate human civilization by eons. But communication with whom? And for what purpose? Simultaneously, the artifacts washing ashore near the Athertons' desolate village became increasingly disturbing. Not just fragments of an unknown alloy, resilient beyond comprehension, but pieces that seemed organic, almost chitinous, yet clearly not biological in any familiar sense. One particular find, a shard roughly the size of a human hand, resonated with a faint, almost imperceptible hum when exposed to certain magnetic fields. It was an energy signature, unlike anything recorded, a cold, ancient power dormant within its very structure. Was this a tool? A fragment of a larger being? Or a warning? The Athertons, now reluctantly cooperating, revealed another layer to their inherited nightmare. Generations past, their ancestors attempted to relocate after an especially brutal wave of disappearances. They sought refuge inland, far from the ceaseless churn of the Pacific. Yet the curse followed. Not through maritime accidents this time, but through a different kind of madness. The elders spoke of a phantom sickness, a creeping paranoia that led to self-imposed isolation, whispers of unseen entities, and ultimately, an inexplicable, silent wasting away. The tether to the ocean, it seemed, was not merely geographical, but spiritual, perhaps even biological. This raised a chilling question. Were the protectors of the trench not confined to the abyssal depths? Could their reach extend beyond the ocean's surface, manifesting in the very minds of those bound by the ancient debt? The historical accounts, initially dismissed as superstitious ramblings, began to take on a terrifying new context. Families along the rugged American coast, not just the Athertons, spoke in hushed tones of the pull of the deep, a psychological erosion that predated any modern understanding of mental illness. What if these were not isolated cases of delusion, but targeted intrusions, a form of psychic enforcement from the abyss? The sheer scope of this potential influence began to reshape our understanding of the curse. It wasn't just about collecting a physical debt, but perhaps about maintaining a primordial silence. Any attempt to escape, any deviation from the unspoken pact, seemed to provoke a response that transcended the physical realm. The disappearing children, the inexplicable accidents, the creeping madness. Were these all facets of a single, unified malevolent will, extending its tendrils from the deepest ocean into the very fabric of human consciousness. What could be the true nature of a protector that demanded such a pervasive, terrifying obedience? The implications were staggering, leading us to an even darker possibility. But the trench's guardians were not merely defending ruins, but actively policing the fragile boundaries between worlds. The ceaseless thrum of the Challenger's call had long masked the deeper pulse of the abyssal world. For weeks, they had meticulously charted seismic anomalies and peculiar acoustic signatures emanating from the Tonga Trench, a deep-sea tapestry woven with impossible geometries. Dr. Eris Thorne, his face etched with the strain of relentless analysis, stared at the hydrophone readouts, a knot tightening in his gut. The patterns, initially dismissed as geological quirks, were growing too complex, too intricate, almost deliberate. They suggested a consciousness, ancient and profound, stirring. Then it happened. A sudden, violent shudder tore through the hull, an impact felt not as a wave, not a tremor, but as a deliberate, immense force. The lights flickered. The primary navigation and communication systems died, plunging the bridge into a terrifying, guttural silence broken by the urgent shriek of backup alarms. On the main sonar display, a colossal amorphous mass had materialized, an echoic anomaly of impossible scale, dwarfing the vessel. It moved with impossible, predatory speed, rising from the trench's deepest, lightless points. It was not a whale, not a tectonic shift. It was a presence. A wave of primal terror ripped through the seasoned crew. Some staggered, clutching heads, reporting a low-frequency hum vibrating through their bones, a sound beyond hearing, inducing dizzying nausea and profound despair. Others spoke of fleeting visions, glimpses of impossible geometry, or chilling whispers of a language not meant for human ears. Dr. Thorne, fighting a sudden, crushing headache that threatened to split his skull. A sensation eerily reminiscent of the Afferton's descriptions of family madness, saw it clearly now. The patterns in the data weren't random. This was a response. This was acknowledgement. This abyssal entity, whatever it was, had not merely been detected. It had chosen to make its existence undeniably felt, a chilling, deliberate gesture from the deep. The torrent of data streamed in, chaotic, contradictory, impossible densities, energy signatures that defied known physics, and fleeting, subliminal echoes of what appeared to be a chorus of sound, ancient, malevolent, resonating from the very bedrock of the earth, a symphony of primordial power. It was a direct communication, not through words, but through an overwhelming imposition of its will. This was no longer passive observation. This was the abyss pushing back. The first undeniable, brutal contact, an uninvited, terrifying communication from a world that had decided it had been disturbed enough. The Challenger's call was caught in an invisible, terrifying net, the crew now viscerally understanding the true, horrifying meaning of the Atherton curse. It wasn't just old family lore. It was a tangible, active, predatory threat that had now directly touched their vessel, their minds, and threatened their sanity. The search for truth had just revealed its monstrous heart. Are you ready to dive deeper into this escalating nightmare? The silence that had long shielded the Atherton family was not merely chosen. It was a desperate defense against insidious anomalies. for generations dismissed as coincidence, oceanic indifference, or creeping madness. But now, amidst horrifying events, these whispers of the impossible coalesced into a terrifying pattern, a mosaic of unnatural occurrences defying all known natural laws. The first profound whispers emanated from the Tonga Trench's unfathomable blackness. Sonar readings, initially dismissed as malfunction, manifested with alarming regularity. These were not Leviathan echoes or geological rumbles. They were impossibly precise, geometric signatures, moving at crushing speeds from depths where no sound should carry. One recurring signature, dubbed the whisper echo, was a complex, multi-tonal pulse resonating with bedrock, a deliberate communication, a rhythmic thrumming from a world utterly alien. Alongside these abyssal vibrations, the shoreline began its grim yield. Fragments, at first mistaken for unusual geological specimens or meteorites, washed ashore along the Pacific Northwest, across widening coastal arcs. These were not natural rocks. Their surfaces shimmered with an impossible metallic sheen, yet possessed a porous, organic quality, as if bone or chitin from an unknown element. They bore no erosion, appearing freshly broken from a larger, monolithic structure. Some held intricate, non-Euclidean patterns, symbols aligning with no known human civilization. Their molecular composition baffled labs, presenting isotopic ratios and atomic structures whispering of genesis far beyond Earth, or terrifyingly profound Earth history. One shard, recovered by a fisherman after a violent storm, pulsed with a faint, internal cerulean luminescence. This light defied explanation, interwoven into the material's fabric, an intrinsic property. It was as if these fragments were not inert debris, but pieces of a living, intelligent construct that had shattered, scattering its inexplicable essence across the world's greatest ocean. These were the first anomalies, initial fractures in our understanding. Not isolated, but a chilling prelude, a deliberate signaling from the deep. What intelligence could craft such impossibilities? Why had it chosen now to reveal itself, just as the Atherton bloodline paid its most horrific price? The ocean, vast and indifferent, was communicating, not in waves, but in the language of terror. What chilling message lay hidden within these enigmatic signals and alien fragments? And what would happen when we finally began to understand? The very fabric of history, particularly one cloaked in such deliberate silence, proved stubbornly resistant to unraveling. Generations of Atherton descendants, bound by an unspoken pact of fear, ensured that the true nature of their inherited burden remained shrouded, a phantom limb of memory that throbbed with unacknowledged pain. Yet the ocean, in its ceaseless churn, has a way of returning what was thought lost, often with a terrifying clarity. It was within the decaying heart of the Atherton ancestral home, a house that breathed salt and sorrow, that the most chilling historical artifact surfaced. Not an official record, but a private, hidden journal belonging to Captain Elias Atherton himself, tucked away in a false bottom of an old sea chest. This wasn't the meticulously maintained ship's log, detailing courses and cargo, but a testament to a mind slowly, horrifyingly unraveling. Its pages, brittle and stained with what appeared to be seawater and something darker, bore witness to a descent into a nightmare far deeper than any Mariana Trench. Elias's early entries, spoke of groundbreaking sonar readings from the Tonga Trench, anomalies too vast, too geometrically precise to be natural formations. He wrote of excitement, of the thrill of imminent discovery, of mapping structures that defied geological explanation. But as the expedition progressed, the tone shifted. The excitement curdled into a creeping dread. He began describing whispers in the abyss, vibrations that resonated not through the hull, but through his very bones. His meticulous sketches of the trench floor began to incorporate impossible angles, non-Euclidean geometries, and then, unnervingly, faint, almost imperceptible outlines of colossal, non-human structures. He spoke of lights, not phosphorescent marine life, but controlled, intelligent luminosity emanating from abyssal depths where light should not exist. The words became frantic, the handwriting erratic. "They watch," he scrawled in one entry, the ink smeared as if in haste or terror. They were never asleep, only observing. The journal then plunges into an account of what Elias termed the retrieval. Not a scientific sample, but a desperate, reckless attempt to bring something, anything from the deepest part of the trench to the surface. He believed it held the key to ultimate knowledge, or perhaps ultimate power. What he described bringing up in fragmented, almost delirious prose was not an artifact of stone or metal, but something organic, yet utterly alien. A pulsating, iridescent mass that emitted a low hum. A sound he claimed caused his crew to suffer from waking nightmares and inexplicable fevers. This was the true moment of transgression, the primordial debt incurred. Elias Atherton hadn't merely stumbled upon a forgotten civilization. He had attempted to exploit it, to steal from it. And the journal chronicles the immediate, horrifying consequences. Disappearances began on board his very ship. Crew members vanishing without a trace, leaving only wet footprints on deck, or the faint, coppery scent of blood. He described a pervasive sense of being watched, of the ocean itself turning hostile, the very waves seeming to reach for them with malicious intent. His final entries are a chilling testament to his profound regret and terror, his mind clearly fractured. He spoke of protectors rising from the deep, not as mindless beasts, but as ancient, implacable custodians. The journal ends abruptly, mid-sentence, the final words a desperate, barely legible plea for understanding, for forgiveness from an unseen ancient force. What dark secret did Captain Atherton truly disturb in the Tonga Trench? And what was the horrific nature of the item he dared to bring to the surface, whose debt is still being collected by the abyssal protectors? The walls of the Atherton home, once a sanctuary, had become a cage. The salt-worn timbers seemed to groan, not just with age, but with the weight of an unseen presence. The ocean, their ancestral provider, now felt like a predator, its ceaseless roar a mocking lament. As deep-sea investigators delved into the family's grim history, the curse's manifestations escalated, transcending mere coincidence. They were witnessing something far more insidious, a deliberate, almost intelligent predation. The creeping madness wasn't simply delusion. It was a prelude. Reports, once dismissed as ramblings, coalesced into a terrifying pattern. Family members, in final stages before inexplicable disappearances, spoke of a humming in the water. A low thrumming vibrating not in their ears, but in their very bones. They described visions of impossible geometries shimmering beneath the Pacific surface, of lights pulsing with an unearthly rhythm, mirroring their own terrified hearts. These were not hallucinations, our researchers hypothesized, but a direct, nonverbal communication, an abyssal siren call tuned to the genetic frequency of the Atherton line. Then came the incident that shattered all pretense of normalcy. Young Elias Atherton, barely 5, vanished from his very bed. No signs of forced entry, no struggle. Only a single, chilling detail. His grandmother, frail and terrified, reported seeing a faint, phosphorescent glow from his room just moments before. On his pillow, left behind, was not a toy, but a small, smooth, obsidian-like fragment, a piece of the same alien material washing ashore from the Tonga Trench. It was warm to the touch, pulsing faintly with that same low hum the afflicted described. This wasn't merely an artifact. It was a direct conduit. The fragment, in proximity with other Atherton family members, provoked profound and terrifying reactions. Those predisposed to the madness experienced heightened agitation, their minds drawn into an unseen current. For those resistant, a new, unsettling symptom emerged, a chilling sensation of immense pressure, as if the deepest ocean had extended its crushing embrace to the very air they breathed. It was as if the abyssal entities were not just hunting, but probing, sensing their prey, using these fragments as extensions of their unfathomable will. Our team theorized the bizarre sonar readings from the Tonga Trench were not just echoes of ruin, but rhythmic pulses of something immense and alive, a signal directly modulating these fragments. The fragments were not accidental debris. They were components of a vast, ancient network, perhaps even parts of the very protectors themselves. This horrifying realization suggested the vanished were not merely lost, but intrinsically linked to this abyssal consciousness, perhaps even assimilated. The Atherton curse, then, was not just a debt, but a grotesque, living mechanism of collection, operating across generations, using the family's bloodline as a key to unlock its terrifying appetite. Are we witnessing merely the collection of a debt, or the grotesque, slow-motion assimilation of an entire lineage into an unimaginable, primordial consciousness lurking beneath the waves? The recent breakthrough in the analysis of the anomalous crystalline fragments uncovered from the abyssal depths and the Pacific Northwest shoreline has reshaped our understanding of the Tonga Trench's hidden world. Dr. Eleanor Vance, the preeminent American authority in abyssal archaeology, her hands gloved and careful, confirmed the fragments exhibited not only an impossible structural integrity, but also an intricate, non-terrestrial design. These were not inert geological curiosities. They were components, possibly of an advanced biomechanical nature, radiating a faint, almost imperceptible energetic signature. We are no longer merely sifting through forgotten ruins. We are uncovering the scattered remnants of a complex, perhaps even living, technological entity. Simultaneously, the peculiar sonar echoes, once interpreted as chaotic geological reverberations from the trench, have been painstakingly re-examined. Dr. Vance's team, utilizing a classified acoustic tomography system developed by the U.S. Navy for clandestine deep-sea surveillance during the height of the Cold War, uncovered a distinct, repeating pattern embedded within the noise. It wasn't random. It was a pulse, a signal, not geological, but undeniably biological. Or perhaps biomechanical. And crucially, it was not merely emanating, it was responding. This terrifying realization echoed the suppressed whispers from forgotten American naval archives. tales of phantom echoes and impossible speeds encountered in the deepest Pacific, dismissed then as sensor anomalies. Could those isolated incidents have been early, unrecognized encounters with these very same forces, the nascent stirrings of something ancient and terrible? This reevaluation of the data shattered previous assumptions, shifting the entire paradigm. The inexplicable vanishing of the Atherton child, the creeping madness plaguing generations of their family line, the chilling maritime tragedies, they suddenly coalesced under a new, horrifying light. The ancestors' ill-fated expedition hadn't simply disturbed an ancient site, it had triggered a retaliatory response. What if these protectors are not inert guardians of stone and metal, but sentient predatory entities, capable of perception, learning, and cold, calculating retribution? This was no longer a curse in the folkloric sense, but a deliberate, targeted hunt, a primordial debt being collected with chilling precision. The tension within the Atherton home, now a makeshift research outpost against the backdrop of the churning Pacific, became a tangible presence. The salt-crusted windows, once offering a grim comfort, now felt like thin, fragile veils separating them from an omnipresent, unseen hunter. Each mournful wail of a distant foghorn, each creak of the old house, seemed to carry a malevolent purpose, a reminder of the relentless tide of an awakened force. The abyssal sonar pulse was growing stronger, its frequency subtly shifting, as if drawing closer, its hidden intent becoming clearer with every terrifying, deliberate beat. Are these ancient remnants merely defensive structures, or are they the tools of a cosmic hunter, slowly but surely reeling in its prey from the abyssal darkness? What does this accelerating, shifting signal truly mean for the Athertons, and for the fragile surface world they inhabit? The pervasive chill that clung to the Atherton ancestral home was not merely the ocean's breath. It was the icy tendril of an ancient, preternatural dread. The marine archaeologists, initially disbelieving of the family's grim tales, had found themselves entangled in a web of evidence that defied their scientific paradigms. The artifacts, once dismissed as geological oddities, now whispered of a technology and a purpose that could not have originated on this earth as we know it. Their very composition, a non-terrestrial alloy, vibrated with a faint, low hum, a resonance that mirrored the bizarre sonar pulses still emanating from the Tonga Trench. It was as if these fragments were pieces of a forgotten language, their silence more deafening than any scream. The creeping madness, long dismissed as a familial predisposition to mental illness, began to reveal a horrifying pattern. It wasn't a random descent into lunacy, but a directed unraveling of the mind, a systematic erosion of identity. Dr. Alistair Finch, the lead marine psychologist on the team, observed a chilling consistency. Those afflicted spoke of a deep hum, a calling from below, and an overwhelming compulsion to return to the sea, not to explore, but to join something vast and indescribable. This was no ordinary madness. It was a form of psychic invasion, a prelude to absorption, a horrifying echo of a will far greater than human comprehension. The most terrifying discovery emerged from the meticulous analysis of the latest sonar readings. They were not merely echoes of an ancient structure, but a complex, rhythmic sequence, a language of pure frequency. When cross-referenced with the peculiar genetic anomalies found within the Atherton bloodline, specific markers indicating an ancestral exposure to extreme deep-sea pressure and an unknown biological agent, a terrifying hypothesis solidified. The curse was not a curse in the conventional sense. It was a finely tuned biological imperative, a debt embedded within their very DNA, a monstrous inheritance. The lost child, it became chillingly clear, was not merely taken. They were, in a literal and terrifying sense, reclaimed. The ancient protectors of the Tonga Trench were not merely guarding ruins. They were actively harvesting a lineage, an offering that ensured their continued dormancy, a grim pact honored by blood. The Athertons were, in essence, a living library of a primordial agreement made long ago. Their very existence a ticking clock counting down to a final, inevitable payment. The artifacts, the sonar, the creeping madness, all were intricate instruments of this ancient, predatory collection. The questions that now haunted the researchers and the remaining Athertons were not if the debt would be fully collected, but what the final payment truly entailed, and whether this ancient obligation would extend its crushing grip beyond the bloodline, to claim the fragile surface world itself. Stay with us, because what we are about to reveal may change your perception of the oceans forever. Are these entities truly protectors, or merely ancient predators maintaining a sustainable harvest? The cold, precise data from the abyssal trenches, meticulously compiled by our marine archaeologists and deep-sea investigators, began to align with a pattern far older and more sinister than any official naval chart or scientific journal could ever admit. We found ourselves sifting through centuries of maritime archives, not just those related to the immediate vicinity of the Tonga Trench, but for unexplained incidents spanning the vast, dark expanse of the Pacific. Reports of entire vessels lost without a trace, their emergency beacons inexplicably silenced, crews succumbing to sudden, pervasive madness found adrift amidst ghostly ships, and strange, unidentifiable sonic signatures. Initially dismissed by naval intelligence as mere geological anomalies or deep-sea tremors, these fragmented whispers from the past, once isolated and conveniently disregarded, now converged into a terrifying, unified chorus. This was the chilling nexus where the meticulously documented, yet conveniently ignored, history of the ocean met the truly unspeakable. The specialists' clinical gaze, once focused purely on geological formations and abyssal biology, sharpened into a profound, horrifying understanding of a deliberate, malevolent intelligence. Each unexplained disappearance, each instance of creeping paranoia among isolated deep-sea crews, each strange seismic pulse that echoed for miles, these were not random misfortunes. They were part of a grotesque tapestry, woven by an unseen, ancient hand from the deepest dark. It was the historical record of an active, relentless force. For the Atherton family, this revelation was not merely an academic breakthrough. It was their inherited horror, finally illuminated in stark, unforgiving detail. The ancestral folly of Thomas Atherton, once a grim cautionary tale whispered in their dying, salt-bleached village, transcended into a cosmic trespass, a debt of primordial proportions. The unidentifiable sonar readings, initially just bizarre echoes, solidified into the resonant frequency of an ancient, predatory chain, a signature of the abyssal protectors. The fragments of alien artifacts, once mere curiosities washing ashore, became chilling pieces of a primordial prison, now irrevocably broken. The confrontation with the curse was not a battle waged with steel and fire in the traditional sense, but one fought in the chilling, absolute clarity of overwhelming knowledge. It was the soul-shattering realization that the unexplained disappearances, the creeping madness, the very fabric of their generations-long cursed existence, were not random misfortunes. They were targeted, intelligent acts of retribution. The abyss didn't merely forget, it remembered with an infinite, terrifying patience. The protectors weren't mythical beasts of folklore. They were the cold, calculating executioners of a debt incurred eons ago, their methods as precise as they were horrifying. They were harvesting souls, claiming what was due. The Athertons, battered and broken by generations of sorrow and inexplicable loss, stood at the precipice of this truth, a revelation that both explained and condemned. The sudden, inexplicable vanishing of their youngest was not an anomaly, but the latest, most brutal installment in an ancient repayment plan that had begun with Thomas Atherton's hubris. The family curse was not a vague misfortune or a psychological delusion. It was a sentient, relentless entity that had, for generations, observed, calculated, and finally, in its own horrifying time, collected. Could this agonizing, undeniable clarity offer them a path to sever the chains? Or had they simply, finally, truly understood the terrifying depth of their inescapable damnation? Stay with us, because what comes next may change your perception of the oceans forever. The silence that descended upon the Atherton family's weathered home was not one of peace, but of a profound, heavy exhaustion. The frantic search, the terrifying revelations, the desperate measures taken in the shadow of the surging Pacific, they had carved new lines of grief and understanding onto the faces of those who remained. The youngest, the catalyst for this final, desperate act, was never found. But the inexplicable disappearances ceased. The gnawing madness, the whispers from the deep that had haunted generations, receded into the background, a chilling echo rather than a dominant voice. The chain, the ancient predatory link forged by their ancestors' hubris, had been severed, or at least stretched taut to its breaking point. Yet the price had been paid in blood, in sanity, and in an irreversible comprehension of a world far older, far more indifferent than humanity had ever dared to conceive. The artifacts, once scattered on the shore, were now meticulously catalogued, whispered about in hushed academic circles. The sonar readings from the Tonga Trench, once erratic and terrifying, settled into a strange, rhythmic hum, a heartbeat from the abyss that science could now detect but still not fully decipher. The Athertons, though survivors, were irrevocably changed. They became the silent guardians of a truth too vast, too terrifying for common understanding. Their story, documented piece by agonizing piece through the careful, often disbelieving lens of marine archaeology and deep-sea investigation, stands as a chilling testament. It is a modern-day American tragedy, a saga woven into the very fabric of maritime history, not as grand conquest, but as an unwitting trespass into primordial domains. What does it truly mean to break a curse that predates human civilization? A debt collected by entities of the deep. Perhaps it means not vanquishing the foe, but understanding its nature, respecting its power, and retreating from the precipice of a knowledge that threatens to unravel the very fabric of our perceived reality. The abyss, in its unfathomable wisdom, had collected its due, but also offered a glimpse into a terrifying past, a forgotten epoch where human ambition was a mere tremor in the grand design of the ocean. Are we truly alone on this blue marble? Or do ancient, forgotten intelligences merely slumber beneath the crushing weight of the dark waters, waiting for our careless touch to reawaken them? The chilling legacy of the Athertons is not just a family's burden, but a stark warning. echoing from the deepest trenches of our planet. Join us as we continue to dive into the oceanic depths, into the unexplored abyssal worlds where history and horror converge. Are you ready to uncover more secrets of the deep? Stay with us, because what we are about to reveal may change your perception of the oceans forever. The oceanic adventure is just beginning. The search for truth never ends, and ours is just beginning.